Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for episode 5 of the Play-by-Play Wrestling Podcast, the daily wrestling podcast. We are live right now on YouTube for you. Hope you're joining us. Thank you for joining us. I am Aatif Nawaz hosting, and of course, as always, with me is Mr. Armaan Kirmani. How are you, sir?
I'm very good with my swig of cola for the working man, as they say.
Swig of cola for the working man. A shout out to Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. On today's show, guys and girls, we're going to be talking about Monday Night Raw, which is on a little bit later tonight, 1 a.m. in the UK, and various times in the US and around the world. We're also going to be talking about the Royal Rumble and Fast Lane, the February pay-per-view. Of course, WWE accidentally dropped some media out, which may or may not spoil the outcomes of certain matches. And of course, we're also going to be talking about Roman Reigns. He's the man of the moment right now. How far are WWE going to go with his push? Is he going to be the big dog? Let's start at the top. Armaan, you were critical of last week's Raw before, weren't you?
Oh, it was awful, man. I don't even want to talk about last week's Raw. I don't want to talk about any of the Raws over the last few weeks. I think I'm being very positive. We're leading up to the Royal Rumble, and I'm hoping that this is going to be a turn, because I know the WWE's been getting a lot of negative press since the authorities come back. People are saying Raw isn't good enough. They're complaining about the booking, and we've done 4 episodes complaining as well. So I'm hoping tonight is our first episode on the same day as Raw. So I am hoping that this being our first ever live broadcast with 1,000 Twitter followers, which I promised you we're going to do a live broadcast. So Raw has to turn the corner, build up to Rumble, and have a nice, good build up into the road to WrestleMania.
Yeah, they haven't started it. Ideally, though, it has to be said, because they haven't advertised anything in advance yet. And by the way, we will be live tweeting Raw. So if you're up watching Raw, follow us at PlayByPlay123 on Twitter and catch our thoughts as it goes on. But yeah, they haven't advertised anything in advance. There is a roster thing, so they've added Brock Lesnar's going to be there, of course. John Cena, as always, will also be there. Daniel Bryan's going to be there, but we know he's not competing because his in-ring return is reserved for SmackDown. They're potentially going to continue the storyline, The Authority versus John Cena, and it is back in New Orleans, which was, of course, the site of WrestleMania 30. So they haven't made anything obvious. They haven't gone out of their way to advertise this Raw or try and get a hook for the audience, aside from the Royal Rumble itself, on the upcoming schedule. What do you make of that?
Well, my impression is it has to be a bit more positive than the last few weeks. I think as soon as they bring the Authority back and the Authority start to dominate sort of the airwaves, the whole show starts to drop. I think people are quite happy to see the back of the Authority, and now that they're back, I think we're on that downward sort of spiral as it is. I'd like to see a bit more of our new Intercontinental Champion. I've got some bad news for you.
He'll be there for sure, and hopefully he'll get some heat back.
And hopefully he won't be jobbing to Sin Cara.
So that was bizarre.
Well, absolutely.
I didn't think they're building Sin Cara for anything. But hey, I was going to mention actually for WrestleMania. Sorry, you were saying Sin Cara. Would you like to see Sin Cara back in action on Monday Night Raw regularly?
I don't mind seeing him back in action in a 3-hour program, but I don't want him defeating my Intercontinental sort of champion who's just won it 3 days before, which is exactly what happened last week.
Sorry, to go back to your point about the Authority, we knew they were going to come back because they've got to set up this feud, this match between Triple H and Sting, which has been built up for a while. They started the build up beautifully at the Survivor Series, and he keeps making reference to it in his promos, the face painted goof called Sting. It's weird. I don't know. Is that what counts for an insult nowadays, the face painted goof?
Well, it's a PG. We can blame John Cena for that if you want. But the bottom line is this. Look, I think this is a really important topic and we need to address it. We haven't talked about it yet on our podcast. But the return of Sting. Now, Sting is a huge name in the world of wrestling. He was a massive name when we were sort of growing up. But I genuinely think I'm the only wrestling fan that doesn't actually care about Sting coming to the WWE. Let me explain why, because I think I've got a lot of explaining to do. Sting is considered a legend, albeit, yes, he is one. But I just never, ever connected with this guy. Whether this was pre sort of his gothic era where he turned sort of black and white before he became the Crow, and I always thought he was overhyped. And I know the WCW booking absolutely smashed him when he came back after that year-long build-up as the Crow and came and then wasn't even able to sort of defeat Hogan. I think it ended in
he won.
Well, eventually. I think his first match he didn't actually win.
So I'll tell you what happened. He beat Hogan, but Bret Hart had to cut. So there was a screw job.
Yeah,
it was the month after the Survivor Series.
Listen, to me, that ruined his legacy for me a little bit. he wasn't in the best of shapes. I think Hogan in his autobiography even mentioned how he wasn't in good shape. That wasn't be the first time Hogan refused to do a job, that's for sure. But at the same time, I think I respect the name he's made for himself. I respect the following, and he's definitely a legend and a very good in-ring worker. But I don't think he needs to come to the WWE to prove himself. I think he'd already had his name, and now I feel, I didn't like his debut at Survivor Series. I was probably the only one. I wasn't one marking out, that's for sure. I didn't like what they did with his entrance music. I don't really want to see him versus Triple H, because him going over Triple H, which almost certainly has to happen, because there's no way Sting has come to the WWE to do a job to Triple H. I'm almost certain of that. And him going, it's almost predictable. I don't really want to see that match. I have no interest in that match.
Well, he's a good in-ring worker, and you've got to still, even the Triple H is on the down and on the slide in terms of match quality, he's still quite good. I mean, he gave a good match against Bryan last year. It served his purpose. And I can see a very reasonable match between Sting, just on the basis of fan interaction. I was rewatching yesterday the Goldberg and Brock Lesnar match from WrestleMania 20, and it would have been a really exciting match, but the crowd, they kind of they decided they were just going to take control of the match. And
Austin, as the guest referee, wanted to take control and stunner everybody.
Well, he was the only over person in the ring. Let's face it, right? But I mean, the point is the crowd dynamic really helps, and you can imagine the crowd getting heavily invested in face Sting over heel Triple H, especially if there was some kind of payoff to that angle where Triple H was to put on authority of Raw on the line, and Sting was the new face authority figure on Raw, which I like for two reasons. One, I'm not a fan of authority figures on Raw, so I like the idea of having somebody who appears more infrequently on television, which Sting would, because you imagine he's not going to take the full WWE travel schedule on and start going town to town every week at his age and at the point he is in his career. But I like the comeback of Sting. Anyway, let's not talk about Sting too. We've got more to say on Sting, I'm sure. But let's talk about the booking, right? Now, the poster came out for Fast Lane, the press release from the pay-per-view companies, and they're advertising as the main event of Fast Lane, WWE's February pay-per-view, Seth Rollins and The Big Show versus John Cena and Roman Reigns. I want you to tell me two things about this, Roman. One, what do you make of that match? And two, what do you think that gives away about the Royal Rumble booking?
I want nothing to do with that pay-per-view if that's the main event. Firstly,
it's really a Raw main event.
Big Show, who's become the big jobber over the last 10, 15 years in his career, is not somebody who should ever main event anymore. He probably needs another 15 years of booking and maybe an undefeated streak at Mania just to get rid of all the damage that his career has gone through over the last 10 years. I'm not surprised that it's a tag team main event necessarily, and more importantly, I'm not surprised that the WWE belt isn't the main event, because I've mentioned previously on this podcast, now we do not need to build around the WWE belt because of the WWE networks, because we're not looking for buy rates. It doesn't surprise me that Brock Lesnar is unlikely to be there, because you'd think that if he was actually at Fastlane, he would be in the main event. So, that's the answer to the first part of the question, is what I think of that sort of booking for the next pay-per-view. In terms of what that gives away for Rumble, I think it's actually not giving away a lot, because whether or not Cena wins the title or he doesn't win the title, whether or not Reigns wins the Rumble or he doesn't win the Rumble, they can still be in that position. Although that might be the way you might be thinking at this moment in time, unless, of course, Rollins is winning the championship, and Cena is chasing again along with Reigns, and they might go for a triple threat.
See, the thing, I read two things into that main event announcement, right? One, I thought, okay, well, to me, it looks like Lesnar's going to retain because he's not at the pay-per-view, and they're having to advertise this big tag match. And B, I think Reigns is going over at the Rumble, and I'll tell you why. I think they know that Reigns isn't getting the response that they want. Reigns, by the way, and I've been through all of Twitter, I know he's got a big old fan base, but it's not to the level of a Steve Austin, a Rock, as they were on their rise. He doesn't strike me yet as the guy that can lead WWE into the next 10, 15 years. So I think they think that rub from Cena is very important. So I don't know if they're kind of teasing tension between them. I don't know if it's a matter of John Cena just sharing the stage with Roman Reigns. That's going to give him the rub. Let's talk about Roman Reigns a little bit as well, because I've gone on the record and said I like Roman Reigns. I think he needs another year before he's headlining WrestleMania. I think this should be Daniel Bryan's year. I've gone on the record to say Daniel Bryan versus Brock Lesnar at Rumble, or Daniel Bryan versus Reigns versus Rollins at Rumble makes sense to me. What do you think of Roman Reigns? Should he be headlining WrestleMania? And is he the man to take WWE into the next 10, 15 years?
Absolutely not. I don't think that he's over enough. I don't think he's worked hard enough to justify a main event position. I don't think his promos are on par. I think recently I've been hearing news that Vince is directly writing his promos and making all these Superman references. I think on SmackDown and on Raw last week. I mean, he's really trying hard to destroy his career by talking a lot. He desperately needs a manager, as far as I'm concerned. So Roman Reigns, I think he should go over in the Rumble, but not necessarily win the Rumble like they did last year, where he was a dominant figure, where he had the record number in history of eliminations, beating Kane's record, of course. But I don't want to see Roman Reigns in the main event at WrestleMania. I want him in a big match program. I want him to work harder. I want him to chase harder. I want him to stay injury-free, especially after this year, where Daniel Bryan won the title after this year-long build-up when he was chasing and then ended up getting injured. And Roman Reigns has been injured very recently with his hernia operation. And really, I'm not convinced he's the real deal to carry the company. And God help us all if we have to listen to Roman Reigns promos after he's won the WWE Championship. So no, I'm not looking forward to him winning the Rumble at all.
So this is the thing. I mean, I don't even think he's the most over of the Shield trio. I like Dean Ambrose's chances, despite the fact that he's been booked a little bit up and down recently. Obviously, lost that feud-ending match to Bray Wyatt, who you rightly mentioned is a good dark horse for the Royal Rumble. But I mean, Dean Ambrose, for me, as a face, is really rocking and rolling for WWE at the moment. They should try and get behind him. Again, I'm not really suggesting he's at that level where he's right on top right now. But they must see something in him, because they offered him that movie. He's doing a movie called, is it called Lockdown or something? He's doing another movie for WWE Films, WWE Studios right now. And we'll talk about that more in a future podcast, actually, the WWE Studios releases. But yeah, I mean, Rollins is obviously, he's made the most of the Shield breakup. He's become the #1 heel, regular heel, I'm going to say, behind Brock Lesnar. But he draws great. He's shown loads of depth to his character. He's elevated himself. He's become a box office draw as well, because he's headlined all the house shows.
Well, I've got to address your point here. You just asked me the question if Roman Reigns is the right guy to lead the WWE, and then at the same time you're saying he's not even the most popular member of his own trio.
Not for me.
He's probably not even the second most popular member of the trio. Where does that leave him?
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that we've got Seth Rollins, who is doing an amazing job, I think, holding on to the company, especially while the Authority were away, as the main heel. And in terms of people who are more over, I think Ziggler is more over and he's more popular. Okay, his booking is terrible, but I think he's more over.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, we've got John Cena's already there. Rusev for the Rumble. I've been saying it for a long time. He's not over, but his gimmick will always stay over, because he's the anti-American and he'll always draw. So at the end of the day,
that stuff, doesn't he?
Well, I love that stuff. And Rusev and Lana, I'd like to see as much of her as possible, as I've mentioned previously on this podcast. Look, now with Jerry Lawler away from WWE commentary, I need to fill that gap, and I'm going to do it through this podcast. Absolutely. So, well, that's actually an interesting dynamic, actually, for tonight. The one thing we do know is that there's going to be a brand new commentary team, which we touched on in our last episode as well.
What did you think of Booker T's announcing last week? Because I mean, it's not something I was looking forward to. And as much as I've scanned of wrestling commentators on the internet, not many people have responded favorably to having Booker T in that announced squad. I understand. I mean, I don't like it, but I understand the demotion of Jerry Lawler a little bit. I think it'll help his health as well, not having to be live every week as he moves to SmackDown. I think more people will start watching SmackDown because the King's on there. Gives it a different dynamic. But Booker T, not feeling it. I've never really enjoyed. I mean, even on those little panels, you know, those expert panels on live social media panels on the pay-per-views. I've never really enjoyed Booker T's commentary per se.
Well, the thing with Booker T is I feel like he's always cutting a promo while he's doing the commentary. And the other problem with Booker T was he wasn't always the clearest person to understand when he cut his promos.
That's right.
He was good at doing the promos, and I think he was very over. And the best thing about Booker T was the Spinaroonie.
Yeah,
absolutely. But he can't be doing the Spinaroonie when he's doing the commentary, and therefore when you take that away from his arsenal, he doesn't become so appealing.
Have you ever, by the way, sorry, off side note, have you ever seen the video of Booker T trying to convince The Undertaker to do a Spinaroonie?
Didn't I send you that?
Right,
I sent you that.
Guys and girls, if you're listening right now, after this podcast, make sure you get on YouTube and find this clip of several WWE superstars trying to persuade The Undertaker to do a Spinaroonie.
I think The Rock is in the ring, Vince is in the ring.
Yes, that's right.
Triple H is in the ring, and I think Vince is actually trying to convince Taker to do the Spinaroonie.
Vince does a Spinaroonie himself.
Yeah, but he's trying to convince Taker. And Taker just gives him this look.
Like this is happening.
Like, if you think I'm going to take my 15-year career, whatever it is at that point, and turn it into a spinneroonie. You got to be, and this is during his American Badass gimmick as well.
Right, yeah.
Oh my God, can you imagine the American Badass doing the spinneroonie? Bloody hell! But having said that, The Rock, in his post-match sort of entertainment with the crowds and live audiences, he did go on to do lots of variations on that.
I mean, it's off the. The thing is, they're not on television anymore. It's just for the live crowd. It sends people home happy. I like those little segments. So in fact, there's a WWE release, a DVD. I think it's a feature on WWE Network, which will have in a week's time. In the UK, that's called After Raw or After the Cameras Turn Off or something. So it focuses on a whole bunch of. There's loads of Steve Austin and The Rock on there. Anyway, since we're talking about that era, let's transition away from Roman Reigns and talk about the Attitude Era. Now, we had a request from one of our listeners, Joel from Media M Spotlight. So thank you so much, Joel, Media Spotlight UK, for sending us through. Now, he wanted us to talk a little bit more about blood on WWE. Now, we don't see blood very often on WWE television anymore. He wanted us to talk about why that's not there anymore, whether it's a good thing for WWE, whether that's one of the things of the Attitude Era that fans are missing. Now, you mentioned before, actually, you've talked about this a lot, about WWE being a publicly traded company, so they have certain standards to abide by. But do you think an injection of blood, pardon the pun, would be something that WWE could benefit from, maybe on the odd occasion?
Look, I never think that blood is a prerequisite for a good match, but I do agree that blood can add to a match. I think during the Attitude Era, it was a little bit overused on occasions, but let's just talk about some really memorable moments with blood in them. Of course, the iconic Steve Austin versus Bret. I think without blood, that wouldn't have led to a double turn to the extent that it did. So
it was the coolest VHS cover as well. I don't know if you bought that.
It was, and interesting. I'm not sure you know, or our listeners may or may not know, that actually the blood was kept away from Vince and was Bret's call.
Yeah, that's right.
And Austin wasn't very. If you listen to Austin's podcast, he wasn't very excited about doing it, but Bret kind of forced it upon him. So yeah, I mean that was one of the memorable occasions. But one other memorable occasion with blood for me was the Hell in a Cell. I think the first match with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker, where we had Kane's debut.
Yes,
that was the most. I think one of the best matches between. I mean, everyone always goes about Taker and Michaels' WrestleMania matches, but for me, that storyline with Kane coming and all that was going on in '97, and that blood really added to the way Michaels wins that match in a pool of his own blood.
Yeah.
And various matches. I think there were 3 stages of hell, and there was sort of Last Man Standing.
Oh,
with
dude! I mean, there's
H.
images that they still bring up to this day when they build their packages. I was watching the Monday Night War the other day, right? And there's a still of Vince McMahon with all that blood on his face when he's taking on Hogan at WrestleMania. Yeah. I am not, and I'm absolutely not suggesting that they should have blood on weekly television like at one stage they did when ECW was in its heyday and that hardcore style was coming in. I was never really a big fan of the hardcore style. I have a lot of positive things to say about ECW, but that's neither here nor there. I would like to see blood on those special occasions when a feud gets so heated. I don't like these pointless gimmick matches like ambulance matches and these last man standing matches when there's no blood anymore, especially when they've ingrained their audience over the years to look for that blood. If Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt hate each other so much, why are they not trying to draw blood? Well, how about a first blood match?
Well, look, I understand that it can add to storylines, but the way the WWE does its booking, they kind of overdo everything you give them. So you give them one table, they're going to want 20 tables the next week. So my worry with blood is then you're going to get the divas fighting over blood as well. Well, that would be something. I don't want to see any blood anywhere near Lana, by the way, just for the record. But I'm just saying, the point is that I am a fan of blood, and I think the only way it should be used is Vince doesn't make the call of when blood should be used, and it should be an in-ring decision made by the wrestlers
and the producer, or the road agent, as they used to be called. So, side note again, right? You just reminded me when you talk about thousands of tables. Do you remember that event with John Cena? I think it was Wade Barrett at the time. He was still called Wade Barrett, and he did this thing where he put the whole set. It must have been TLC. Because the set had like 50 chairs on it, and he just pulled the set apart, and like 50 chairs just rained down on Wade Barrett. It was an amazing visual. You just don't see much of that anymore, which is WWE again de-emphasizing the violence.
But no, I mean coming back to blood, I don't want it to be overused, but I think it would be a welcome addition to today's product. I don't think it takes you out the PG era necessarily if it's done in good taste. And in fact, one memorable moment that springs to my mind with blood is a really old situation between Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, where Andre does the turn on Hogan and rips off his cross, which I think was inadvertent, and he accidentally, I think, in that scuffle, scratches Hulk's chest, which is now dripping with blood, and Hulk is trying to break down into tears at the same time, and so that was as PG as you got at that time, right? The immovable object and that gimmick.
It was believable, and it's emotional. And it's not gratuitous.
But that's what I'm saying. You need the blood to be emotional and to be invested within the storyline. And unless it's going to reach those levels, I mean, I remember when we had the first blood match between Kane and Stone Cold. It might not be the first ever, but the first ever in the modern era, definitely.
WWE for sure.
In WWE. Kane came out in a mask, and he used to have one arm. Singlet. It was sort of like one arm was always
exposed.
there. But in the first blood match, he actually had it covered. So where was that blood? That added to the story. And even funnily, I think Austin had an elbow injury or infection that weekend, so he actually came in with straps on all the way.
If you want to see that match, by the way, that's at King of the Ring 1998. By the way, this is the first blood match between Steve Austin and Kane. Listen, Armaan, we're coming to the end of the podcast, so let's answer the Friday's question of the day. Now, Glenn Abbott is a superstar because he gets in there so quickly, but we also had correct answers from various people.
Ayaz Arshad
was one of them. MD Rahman was another. Tom Jackson was another one.
Around the world.
It's great. Thank you so much to everybody who tried to answer it. But Glenn Abbott, the play-by-play, he's part of the play-by-play universe, I want to say. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's part of our universe. So he got the answer in there correctly. Do you remember what the question was?
Yeah, absolutely. I asked what was the storyline when Flair left the WWE in his first run, and it was actually one of my favorite matches, which is actually today's match of the day for me as well, and I had planned this.
Wonderful.
So I want everyone to go and watch Ric Flair versus Mr. Perfect, loser leaves town, or I think that's what it was under match, and it's one of the early 1993 Royal Rumble matches, which is very underrated, and a lot of people don't talk about it. And I think you should all watch it because it was, one favorite wrestler, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, just showing an absolute masterclass and an absolute great wrestling match in the very early days of Monday Night Raw.
Absolutely. Hey, that's a great match. I really recommend people see that as well. And the story behind why that match was booked the way it was is quite fascinating. Maybe we can go into that a little bit more tomorrow for episode 6. Guys, thanks for joining us for episode 5 here. Your question of the day today is from me, and I'm going to make it a little bit easy for you guys. All you have to do is go through our previous podcast to find the answer to this, right? Now, Stone Cold Steve Austin has had loads of VHS tapes, loads of DVDs, loads of Blu-rays released in his tenure as a WWE superstar. Now, we mentioned one today because Stone Cold said so, but my question is, of all the DVDs, and I've already mentioned this on a previous podcast, what is my favorite, Aatif? What is Aatif's favorite Stone Cold Steve Austin DVD, right? There are 4 or 5 out there, as Stone Cold said so. That was the first. There was Austin 316 Uncensored, which was the second. And Armaan over here, you can't see him, he's shaking his head because he knows what it is, and he hated it, which should be a big clue for you guys. So I want to know what my favorite Stone Cold Steve Austin DVD slash VHS slash Blu-ray is that's been out there.
Slash torrent.
I
didn't just say that.
Well, mate, I'm not sure if it's on the network as well. It might be on the network.
Rusev for the Rumble.
Rusev for the Rumble. I still think Daniel Bryan is going to take the Rumble this year. I hope he does anyway. He's my shout. We'll talk more about the Rumble tomorrow, guys. As always, remember, if you want to get your questions into us, tweet us at PlayByPlay123. Email us questions at playbyplay123.co.uk. And of course, like our page on Facebook, which is there as the Play-by-Play page. Guys, please tell all your friends about our podcast, about our live broadcast now. We're trying to get this out there. It's a fun podcast. We try and talk about, it's just 2 fans who love wrestling, talking about things that get us excited within, of course, the confines of the wrestling industry.
We're celebrating 1,000 viewers today.
That's right.
We're also celebrating ongoing partnerships with new wrestling news sites, new people. We're going around the world, getting great followers from everywhere, and actually just listening to all of you and trying to find out who you guys support, which often always is not in line with my views. So as I said, I don't want Reigns in the main event at Mania. So let's all watch Raw tonight. Tomorrow's show will all be reviewing tonight's episode of Raw, the new commentary team.
We'll also be live tweeting Raw tonight as well. So if you're watching Raw live in the UK, it's 1 a.m. So tough slog. But I'll be up. I'll be tweeting Aatif Nawaz. I'll be tweeting from the Play-by-Play account all night whilst Raw is on. So talk to me and share some views.
Yeah, Aatif will be tweeting because I'm not going to be staying up that night. So
you're a DVR Raw.
I wonder how I'll be watching it tomorrow. So here we go.
Sky Plus. Anyway, guys and girls, thank you so much for joining us. This has been episode 5 of the Play-by-Play Wrestling Podcast, the daily wrestling podcast with me, Aatif Nawaz, with Armaan Kirmani, from both of us here. Goodbye.
Reset for the Rumble.